On an ordinary night, she said the one sentence she never should have said. "I dreamed about you," and her world changed forever. He was her boss, and she just wanted to be seen for a second. If you like love and romance stories, watch until the end. You won't regret it. Subscribe to this channel and leave your comment saying where you're listening to this beautiful story from. Let's continue. New York City pulsed outside the 33rd floor windows, but inside, in the almost religious silence of Wolfman Corp's corridors, Claire moved like a shadow. It was 2:15 on a Tuesday morning, and she pushed the cleaning cart with precise, automatic movements, born from 2 years of doing the exact same thing at the same time, through the same polished marble hallways. 26 years of life, and she still felt invisible. Maybe she always had been, since she was a little girl when her mother worked as a housekeeper in homes on the Upper East Side, and she would sit quietly, in a corner, observing families that seemed to live on another planet. Since she was a teenager, when she realized that the boys at school looked right through her as if she were made of glass. Since forever, really. But here, at Wolfman Corp, invisibility had a different weight. Here she cleaned the traces of people who moved millions of dollars with a signature, who decided the future of thousands of families in 15-minute meetings, who lived in a sphere so distant from ordinary reality that they seemed almost mythological. The damp cloth glided over the mahogany boardroom table, and Claire allowed herself a moment of imagination. What would it be like to sit in those Italian leather chairs? What would it be like to have a voice to decide something, anything, in her own life? She shook her head, banishing the thoughts. Dreaming too much hurt, and she already had enough scars. The elevator took her to the 33rd floor, and her heart gave that familiar flutter. This was his floor. Leonard Wolfman. The man she had been watching for months, always from a distance, always in secret. He used to work late, very late, and sometimes when she arrived for her night shift, the light in his office was still on. Claire pushed the cart down the silent corridor, the rubber wheels making only a whisper against the floor. The company slept, but she knew he was still there. He always was. Leonard Wolfman didn't seem to have a home, a family, a life outside those walls of glass and concrete. She stopped in front of his office door and took a deep breath. Through the glass, she could see his silhouette hunched over the desk, his shoulders tense, the light from the computer screen illuminating his angular face. 44 years old, heir to one of the country's largest real estate empires, and he looked like he carried the weight of the world on his shoulders. There was something about him that drew her in like a magnet. It wasn't just his masculine beauty, the dark hair always perfectly styled, the tailored suits that cost more than she earned in a year. It was something deeper, more unsettling. It was the way he sometimes stared into space, as if searching for something he could never find. It was the loneliness that emanated from him, like an expensive cologne, invisible but unmistakable. Claire recognized herself in that loneliness, and it both scared and fascinated her. She began to clean the desks outside his office, moving slowly, trying not to make a sound. But her eyes always returned to him, like a compass needle pointing north. Leonard was writing something, his brows furrowed in concentration, his long fingers typing on the keyboard with surgical precision. That's when he looked up and saw her. Their eyes met through the glass, and Claire felt the world stop. His eyes were grey, cold as steel, but there was something beneath the surface, something she recognized. Exhaustion, emptiness, the same feeling of living on autopilot that she knew so well. For a second, 2 seconds, an eternity, they stared at each other. Then Leonard lowered his head and went back to work, as if she were truly invisible. But Claire had felt it, had seen it. For a fraction of a second, he had truly seen her. And something inside her ignited. That night, she went home on the 3 a.m. bus and couldn't sleep. She lay in her small apartment in the Bronx, staring at the peeling ceiling, reliving that moment. His eyes, the way he had looked at her, as if trying to decipher a secret code. And for the first time in years, Claire allowed herself to dream. In the dream, he came out of his office. He walked toward her with slow, deliberate steps. He said nothing, just reached out and touched her face with a gentleness that contrasted with the hardness in his gaze. She leaned into his touch, starved for attention, for affection, for anything that would make her feel alive. "You see me," she whispered in the dream. "I always have," he answered, and kissed her with an urgency that spoke of years of repressed loneliness. Claire woke up with her heart racing, her cheeks burning. The dream had been so real she could still taste him on her lips, his masculine scent, the texture of the expensive suit under her fingers. She got up, took a cold shower, tried to focus on reality, but the dream haunted her all day. While she was grocery shopping, while she was doing laundry, while she was watching television. Leonard Wolfman had invaded her thoughts like a virus, and she couldn't get rid of him. The next night she returned to the 33rd floor with a new nervousness, an anticipation that made her hands tremble. This time, when she passed his office, Leonard wasn't there. The desk was tidy, the chair pushed in, everything perfectly organized as always. Claire felt an absurd pang of disappointment. But the next night, he was there. And the one after that. And slowly, a silent routine was established between them. She would arrive, start her cleaning, pass by his office. He would look up, they would lock eyes for a few seconds, and he would return to his work. It was so little. It was almost nothing. But for Claire, who had spent her entire life being ignored, those seconds of attention were like oxygen to a drowning lung, and the dreams grew more intense. She dreamed that he called her into his office. She dreamed that he closed the door and asked her to tell him about herself, about her fears, her desires, her most hidden secrets. She dreamed that he listened to her with genuine attention, as if every word that left her mouth was precious. She dreamed that he touched her. First just their hands, fingers intertwined like teenage lovers. Then her face tracing the line of her jaw, the curve of her lips. Then Claire always woke up at the same point, breathless, slick with sweat and desire. It was wrong to dream of a man she barely knew, someone as far out of her reach as the moon. It was dangerous to feed fantasies that could never become reality, but she couldn't stop. On Thursday of the third week, something changed. Claire was cleaning the hallway windows when she heard footsteps behind her. They were firm, decisive steps she already knew by heart. Leonard usually took the stairs, never passing through the corridor where she worked. She turned slowly, the cloth still in her hand, and saw him standing a few feet away. Up close, he was even more imposing. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a square jaw and those grey eyes that seemed to see right through people's souls. "How long have you worked here?" he asked, and his voice was exactly as she had imagined in her dreams, deep, controlled, with a natural authority that made people obey without question. Claire swallowed hard. 2 years, Mr. Wolfman." He nodded as if processing the information. "And you always work alone?" "Always." The word came out hoarser than she expected. Leonard took a step toward her, and Claire caught the scent of his cologne, expensive and masculine, mixed with something subtler, more human. Tiredness, perhaps, or loneliness. "What's your name?" "Claire." He repeated the name softly, as if testing the sound in his own voice. "Claire." There was something almost intimate in the way he said it, and she felt a shiver run down her spine. "Mr. Wolfman, I need to get back to work," she stammered, not knowing why she was explaining herself. He was the boss. He could do whatever he wanted, but he didn't move away. He just kept looking at her with that unsettling intensity, as if he were trying to read something written in a foreign language. "Do you have dreams, Claire?" The question caught her completely off guard. "What do you mean, sir?" "Dreams, ambitions, things you want from life." She was speechless. No one had ever asked her that. Not her mother, not the few friends she had, not even herself, if she were being honest. Life had always been about survival, about getting through one day to the next, about not setting her expectations too high so she wouldn't be disappointed. She began, but she didn't know how to finish. Leonard waited, not impatiently, not tapping his fingers or checking his watch. He waited as if he had all the time in the world, as if her answer were the most important thing in the universe at that moment. And then, for some reason, The words came out, "I dream of being seen, of being important to someone." As soon as she said it, Claire regretted it. It was too intimate, too vulnerable. She had exposed herself to a man who could fire her with a snap of his fingers, who lived in a world where people like her were replaceable parts. But Leonard didn't laugh. He didn't make a joke, didn't show any contempt. His eyes intensified, as if she had said exactly what he needed to hear. "We all want to be seen," he said softly. "The problem is we rarely find someone willing to truly look." And then he walked away, leaving her alone in the hallway, her heart pounding like a frantic drum in her chest. That night, Claire had the most intense dream yet. Leonard called her into his office, closed the door, and for the first time in her dreams she dared to speak first. "I had a forbidden dream about you," she said, looking directly into his eyes. And instead of laughing or being scandalized, he moved closer, cupped her face in his hands and whispered, "Tell me. Don't leave anything out." Claire woke up trembling. The dream had been so real she could have sworn she still felt his hands on her skin, the warmth of his male body close to hers. And for the first time since she started dreaming about Leonard, Wolfman, she wondered, what if it wasn't just a dream? What if he really did see her? What if that conversation in the hallway meant something? It was a dangerous idea, an idea that could destroy the quiet, predictable life she had built. But as she got ready for another night of work, Claire couldn't get it out of her head. Maybe it was time to take a risk. Maybe it was time to find out what would happen if she stopped being invisible. The elevator climbed slowly through the floors of Wolfman Corp, and with each passing level, Claire's heart beat faster. Tonight would be different. She could feel it in her skin, in the air, in the way the city below seemed to pulse with a new energy. Tonight, she would finally have the courage to speak the truth. The elevator doors opened on the 33rd floor, and Claire pushed her cart down the familiar corridor. The light in Leonard's office was on, as always. He was there, as always. But this time, when she stopped in front of the glass door, he wasn't working. He was waiting. Leonard Wolfman was standing beside his desk, hands in his pockets, his gaze fixed on the door, as if he knew she was coming, as if he had spent the entire night thinking about the same thing she had. Their eyes met through the glass, and this time, neither of them looked away. For long seconds they stared at each other, a silent conversation happening on a level that transcended words. Then Leonard walked to the door and opened it. "Claire," he said simply, "come in." Claire hesitated for a second that felt like an eternity. The cleaning cart stood between her and the open door, a physical barrier reminding her of who she was, where she was, of how impossible this was. But Leonard's eyes pulled her in like a magnetic force, and before reason could win, she left the cart in the hallway and stepped inside. The office was even more impressive up close. Glass walls offered a spectacular view of New York City sleeping below, the city lights creating a golden mosaic that stretched to the horizon. The desk was enormous, made of dark, polished wood, surrounded by chairs that cost more than her yearly salary. But what impressed her most was the silence. Up here, the chaos of the metropolis transformed into a distant, soft symphony. Leonard closed the door behind her, and the sound of the latch echoed in the room. Claire felt her heart race even faster, if that was possible. They were alone, truly alone, for the first time. "Sit down," he said, gesturing to one of the armchairs in front of his desk. But Claire shook her head. "I can't, Mr. Wolfman. It's not appropriate. I'm just—" "You're just what?" His voice cut her off, more incisive now. "An employee, a cleaner, is that how you define yourself?" Claire lowered her eyes. It was exactly how she defined herself. It always had been. "Look at me, Claire." The command was soft, but impossible to refuse. She raised her gaze and got lost in those grey eyes that seemed to see through every layer of protection she had built over the years. "You said you dream of being seen, of being important to someone." Leonard took a step toward her. "So tell me, what else do you dream of?" The question hung in the air between them, charged with a tension Claire could almost touch. She knew he wasn't asking about professional dreams or future plans. He was asking about the other dreams, the dreams that made her wake up in the middle of the night with her body on fire and his name on her lips. She began, but her voice failed her. Leonard moved closer, so close she could feel the heat from his body, the masculine scent that had become her secret obsession. He reached out and touched her face, very lightly, with the tips of his fingers. The touch was electric, sending shock waves through Claire's entire body. "You don't have to be ashamed," he whispered. "Not here. Not with me." And that's when the words came out in a torrent she couldn't control. "I dream about you every night. I dream that you touch me, that you kiss me, that you really see me. I know it's wrong. I know I'm crazy. But I can't stop." Instead of pulling away, Leonard smiled. It was the first smile she had ever seen on his face, and it completely transformed his features. The hardness softened, his eyes warmed, and for a moment he looked years younger. "It's not crazy," he said, his hand still on her face. "And it's not wrong. Do you want to know why?" Claire nodded, unable to speak. "Because I dream about you too. Ever since the first night we looked at each other through the glass, you've infiltrated my thoughts in a way I couldn't explain." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Claire felt her legs weaken, and Leonard steadied her by the arm, pulling her closer. "But you need to understand something," he continued, his voice growing more serious. "I'm not an easy man. I'm not affectionate. I'm not romantic. I don't promise happy endings. I'm complicated, controlling, and I come with baggage that could sink a ship. If you get into this with me, there are no guarantees." Claire looked into his eyes, seeing the brutal honesty there. He was being clear, direct, offering her a way out before anything even began. It was rational, sensible. But rationality had left the building a long time ago. "What if I want to get in anyway?" she asked, surprised by her own courage. Leonard studied her face for a long moment, as if weighing all the possible consequences. Then slowly he leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't the kiss from her. Dreams. It wasn't soft or romantic. It was intense, desperate, charged with months of unresolved tension. His hands tangled in her hair, pulling her closer, and Claire felt as if she were drowning and being saved at the same time. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathless. Leonard rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed, as if fighting an internal battle. "There's a place," he said finally, "a floor that officially doesn't exist. It was built during the company's expansion but never catalogued in the official records. I use it as a refuge. If you want to continue this, it will be there, away from prying eyes, away from the world." Claire felt a shiver run down her spine. The idea of a secret place just for them was both terrifying and seductive. "The 34th floor," she murmured. Leonard looked at her in surprise. "How do you know?" "I count the floors every night in the elevator. I've always wondered why it skips from 33 to 35. He smiled again, and Claire realized she liked that smile more than she should. "Observant. I like that." Leonard stepped back, moving behind his desk, and for a moment, the world returned to normal. He was the billionaire CEO, she was the cleaner. Reality imposed itself between them like a concrete wall. "Tomorrow night," he said, his voice returning to its professional tone. "At 2:30, take the service elevator at the end of the hall and use this card." He held out a golden key card. "It will take you directly to the 34th floor." Claire took the card with trembling hands. It was small and heavy, the metal cool against her palm. "And if I don't go?" "Then you don't go, and we'll pretend this conversation never happened." His eyes hardened again. "The choice is yours, Claire. It always will be." She put the card in her uniform pocket and walked to the door. Before leaving, she turned to look at him one last time. Leonard was leaning against the desk, arms crossed, watching her with that intensity that made her feel naked, even fully clothed. "Leonard," she said, using his first name for the first time. "Why me?" He was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, just as her hand was on the doorknob, she heard his voice. "Because you're the only person in this building who looks at me like I'm human, and not like a bank account. Claire left the office with shaky legs and a racing heart. She finished her cleaning on autopilot, her mind completely focused on the card that weighed in her pocket as if it were made of lead. The rest of the night passed in a haze. She cleaned rooms, emptied trash cans, mopped floors, all mechanically, while her mind replayed every second of that conversation. His touch on her skin, the kiss, the implicit promise of their meeting the next night. When she finally got home, the sun was already rising. Claire took a long shower, trying to process everything that had happened. She looked at herself in the foggy mirror of her tiny bathroom and wondered if she was crazy. Leonard Wolfman, the most powerful man she knew, owner of an empire, heir to an incalculable fortune. And he had kissed her. Claire Santos, daughter of a housekeeper, a resident of the Bronx, invisible to the rest of the world. It was too surreal to be true. But the golden keycard on her nightstand proved it hadn't been a dream. She spent the entire day in a state of growing nervousness. She couldn't eat, couldn't sleep properly, couldn't concentrate on anything but the approaching meeting. In the afternoon, she went to a mall in Queens and bought new lingerie with the lunch money she had saved. It was nothing too expensive or sophisticated, but it was pretty delicate and it made her feel a little more confident. When she arrived at the company that night, Claire was shaking with nerves. She cleaned the first few floors with robotic efficiency, time seeming to crawl by like molasses. Every minute that passed increased her anxiety and excitement in equal measure. At 2:25, she was standing in front of the service elevator, the golden card in her sweaty hand. For a moment, she considered giving up, going home, forgetting all about it, continuing to be the invisible Claire she had always been. But then she remembered his eyes, the way he had touched her, how for the first time in her life, someone had truly seen her. She swiped the card. The elevator opened with a soft ding, revealing an interior different from the regular elevator. This one was smaller, more luxurious, with mirrored walls and a soft, golden light. Claire stepped inside, and the elevator began to ascend on its own, without her needing to press a button. 34th floor. The doors opened, and Claire found herself in a hallway completely different from anything she had seen in the company. The walls were paneled with dark wood, the lighting was indirect and warm, and there was a sort of living room at the end of the hall, with leather sofas and a gently crackling fireplace. Leonard was there, standing by the window, looking at the city below. He had taken off his jacket and tie, and the top buttons of his white shirt were undone. It was the first time Claire had seen him without his full suit, and he seemed more human, more approachable. "You came," he said without turning around. "I said I would," Claire replied, trying to sound braver than she felt. Leonard turned then, and his gaze traveled over her from head to toe. It wasn't an objectifying look, but an appreciative one, as if he were admiring a work of art. "You look beautiful," he said simply. Claire felt her face flush. She was wearing the same uniform as always. She had just taken more care with her hair and makeup. But the way he said it made her feel like the most beautiful woman in the world. "This place is incredible," she said, looking around. Leonard approached, his hands in his pockets. "It's been my refuge for years. When the weight of the company got too heavy, when the decisions were too difficult, I'd come up here. You're the first person I've ever brought here." The meaning of his words hit her like a punch. She was the first, of all the women who had surely passed through his life, all more beautiful, richer, more suitable. She was the first one he had brought to his secret place. "Why?" she asked, echoing her question from the night before. Leonard stopped right in front of her, so close she could see the details of his eyes, the small expression lines, the shadow of his 5 o'clock shadow. "Because up here, I'm not Leonard Wolfman. I'm not the CEO, I'm not the heir. I'm nothing but a man who's tired of pretending he doesn't need anyone." He raised his hand and caressed her face. "And you're not the cleaner, you're just Claire, the woman who saw me when I thought I was invisible." And then he kissed her again, but this time it was different. It was slow, exploratory, as if he wanted to memorize every detail. Claire melted into his arms, all her defenses crumbling at once. When they parted, Leonard led her to the sofa. They sat side by side, their hands intertwined, watching the fire in the hearth. "Tell me about yourself," he said. "Everything. Your childhood, your fears, your dreams. Everything no one else knows." And there, on the 34th floor that didn't exist, Claire began to talk. She told him about the mother who raised her alone, about the job she'd had since she was 14, about the loneliness that had followed her like a shadow her whole life. She told him about the books she read in secret at the public library, about the dreams of studying architecture she had abandoned for lack of money, about the constant fear of not being good enough for anything or anyone. Leonard listened to it all in silence, his fingers drawing lazy circles on her palm. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "Architecture," said finally. "You want to design buildings like this one?" Claire shrugged. It was just a childhood dream, kind of silly, really. "It's not silly." His voice grew firmer. "Never give up on your dreams for lack of money. Money is just a tool." They talked all night. Leonard spoke of the pressure of carrying the family legacy, of his controlling mother, of the loneliness of being surrounded by people who only wanted something from him. He spoke of the sleepless nights, of the decisions that affected thousands of lives, of the weight of responsibility that sometimes left him breathless. When the sun began to rise, they were still on the sofa, now lying down, Claire's head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I have to go," she murmured, but made no move to get up. "I know." His fingers toyed with her hair. "Tomorrow again?" Claire lifted her head to look at him. "Are you sure? This could complicate everything for you." Leonard pulled her closer and kissed her forehead. "Claire, for the first time in years I feel alive. Don't ask me to give that up now." She went home with the sun, with already high, her body still vibrating from his proximity. There was a new lightness in her step, as if she had finally found something worth waking up for every day. But as she showered, a cruel little voice in her head began to whisper doubts. How long would this last? What would happen when he got tired of her? What would happen if they were found out? Claire shook her head, banishing the negative thoughts. It didn't matter what happened in the future. For now, for the first time in her life, she had been chosen. She was seen. She was wanted. And that would have to be enough. But deep down, in the deepest part of her heart where she kept her darkest secrets, Claire already knew it wouldn't be enough. She already knew she was falling in love with the man who had promised no guarantees, and she already knew this would probably destroy her. But for now, she didn't care. The weeks that followed created a secret routine that became Claire's new reality. During the day, she slept a few hours, dreaming of the night to come. In the afternoon, she would get ready carefully, choosing her underwear as if for an official date, applying the one bottle of perfume she owned. And at night, after completing her cleaning duties on the other floors, she would go up to the 34th floor, where Leonard would be waiting. The place that didn't exist became the only place where she truly lived. Slowly, they built an intimacy that transcended the physical. Leonard brought her architecture books, expensive editions that he would flip through while she explained her imaginary projects. Claire cooked for him in a small kitchen she discovered at the back of the floor, simple dishes that he devoured as if they were delicacies, because they were made with care, with affection, with no ulterior motives. They made love for the first time on a rainy Thursday, 3 weeks after their first meeting. Leonard had arrived more tense than usual, the day filled with difficult meetings and complicated decisions. Claire found him standing by the window, his shoulders rigid, his gaze lost in the rain beating against the glass. She approached slowly, placed her hands on his shoulders, and began to massage him gently. Leonard sighed, relaxing under her touch, his head tilting back until it rested on Claire's shoulder. "Tough day?" she asked softly. "They always are." His voice came out tired. "Sometimes I wonder if it's worth it. All this weight, all this responsibility. For what?" Claire made him turn to her, framing his masculine face between her hands. There was something so vulnerable in those grey eyes that her heart ached. "It's worth it because you're good at what you do. Because you take care of thousands of families, provide jobs, build homes. Because you matter." Leonard looked at her as if she had said something impossible. No one has ever said that to me." "Then everyone in your life is blind," Claire replied and kissed him. This time the kiss was charged with a different urgency. His hands became more insistent, roaming the curves of her body with a hunger she recognized because she felt the same. They moved to the bedroom she had discovered the week before, an intimate space with a king-size bed and windows overlooking the city lights. Leonard undressed her slowly, as if unwrapping a precious gift. He kissed every inch of skin he exposed, murmuring low words in English and other languages she didn't recognize, a mixture born from the urgency of the moment. When they finally came together, Claire felt as if she were being completed in a way she never knew was possible. Afterward, lying naked under the expensive sheets, Leonard traced invisible patterns on her skin with his fingertips. "You scare me," he said suddenly. Claire propped herself up on an elbow to look at him. "Why?" "Because you make me want things I swore I'd never want." His eyes met hers. "You make me want to be a better man." It was in that moment that Claire knew with a certainty that terrified her, that she was hopelessly in love with him. It was no longer admiration, no longer physical attraction, no longer the thrill of being seen. It was love. The kind of love that changes the chemistry of your blood, that rewrites your genetic code, that turns two people into one. And Leonard? She still wasn't sure what he felt. Desire, yes. Affection, maybe. But love? That word never left his lips, and Claire didn't dare ask, afraid of the answer. It was the following week that things began to change. Claire was finishing cleaning the 20th floor when she heard voices coming from one of the meeting rooms. The door was ajar, and she immediately recognized Leonard's voice. But there was another voice, female, authoritative, speaking to him in a tone she had never heard anyone use with the CEO of the company. Curious, she approached slowly, trying to overhear the conversation. "It's unacceptable, Leonard. Absolutely unacceptable." The woman's voice cut through the air like a blade. "You've been neglecting your responsibilities. Your demeanor has changed completely. The shareholders are starting to notice." "My demeanor is perfectly adequate, Mother." Leonard's voice sounded tense. "And my responsibilities are up. To date, Mother." Claire's stomach clenched. Helena Wolfman, the family matriarch, the woman who had built the empire alongside her husband, who was said to be even more ruthless in business than her own son. "Don't lie to me. I've known you since you were born. I know all your habits. You've been coming in late, leaving earlier, and there's something different in your eyes. Something soft." The last word was pronounced as if it were a curse. "And that's a problem because softness is weakness in our world, Leonard, and you can't afford to be weak. Not when we have so much to lose." There was a pause, and when Leonard spoke again, his voice was icy. "What are you implying?" "I'm implying that you're involved with someone, and from the way you're trying to hide it, I'd bet it's not someone from our social circle." Claire felt the blood freeze in her veins. She couldn't be hearing this. She couldn't be finding out like this, hiding behind a door like a child. "My personal life is none of your business," Leonard replied, but there was less conviction in his voice now. Helena gave a cold laugh. "Your personal life becomes my business when it starts to affect the company. And if you're wasting your time with some unsuitable girl, then yes, it is my problem." "Unsuitable." Leonard repeated the word as if testing its taste. "Interesting choice of words." "You know exactly what I mean. A woman of our standing understands the responsibilities that come with the Wolfman name. She knows how to behave, how to speak, how to represent the family. Anything else is a mistake that could cost you dearly." Claire felt as if she'd been punched in the gut. All the insecurities she had, tried to bury, resurfaced at once. She really was unsuitable. She was a cleaner, the daughter of a housekeeper, with no formal education, no money, no connections. What was she doing dreaming of a man like Leonard? "Are you finished?" Leonard asked, and there was a coldness in his voice she had never heard before. "For now." "But Leonard—" Helena's voice softened, becoming almost motherly. "I love you. You are my son, my masterpiece. I don't want to see you destroy everything we've built because of some fleeting infatuation." Fleeting infatuation. The words echoed in Claire's mind like a funeral bell. Was that what she was? A temporary whim? Claire backed away from the door, her heart pounding so hard she was sure the entire building could hear it. She finished cleaning the floor mechanically, her mind spinning in vicious circles of insecurity and fear. When she finally went up to the 34th floor that night, Leonard was waiting as always. But something had changed. She could see it in his posture, in the way he avoided her gaze for the first few minutes. "Are you all right?" he asked, moving to kiss her as he always did. But Claire pulled away. "You had an interesting conversation with your mother today," she said, surprising herself with the assertiveness in her own voice. Leonard stopped in his tracks, his eyes narrowing. "You were listening?" "Not on purpose, but I heard enough." Claire crossed her arms, trying to shield herself from what was coming. "Am I a fleeting infatuation, Leonard?" He was silent for so long that the answer became unnecessary. When he finally spoke, his voice was careful, controlled. "My mother doesn't understand." "Doesn't understand what? That you're having fun with the help, that it's just a phase." The words came out bitter, poisoned by the pain growing in her chest. "It's not like that." "Then what is it like?" Claire took a step toward him, her eyes shimmering with tears she refused to shed. "Explain it to me, Leonard, because from where I'm standing, it looks exactly like your mother described." Leonard ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration she had learned to recognize. "It's complicated. It's always complicated when you have to choose between the woman you're sleeping with and the family empire, isn't it?" The coldness in her voice hit him like a slap. Leonard looked at her as if she had turned into a stranger. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under," he said finally. "You don't understand what's at stake." "You're right. I don't understand." Claire walked to the window, looking at the city below, the lights seeming more distant now. "I don't understand how someone can make another person feel special, important, loved, and at the same time treat them like a dirty secret that needs to be hidden." "I never said you were a dirty secret. You didn't have to. Your actions speak louder." She turned to face him. "Leonard, answer me one thing. If your mother found out about us, if the press found out, if all your rich friends found out, would you take our relationship public?" Again, the silence was the answer. Claire nodded, as if a suspicion had been confirmed. "That's what I thought." "It's not as simple as you're making it out to be," Leonard said, and there was a note of desperation in his voice now. "There are things you don't know, things about the company, about the family." "Then tell me. Explain to me why a cleaner can't fall in love with her boss without being a problem for everyone involved." Leonard stared at her for a long moment, as if weighing his words. Then, unexpectedly, he went to a filing cabinet and pulled out a folder. "There's something you need to know," he said, his voice tense. "Something I discovered a few weeks ago when I had your background checked." "You had me investigated?" Claire's voice rose an octave. "It's security protocol for anyone with access to the company's upper floors. It wasn't personal, it was just—" He stopped, realizing how that sounded. "Of course, security protocol. How could I forget I'm just another employee who needs to be vetted?" The sarcasm was sharp. "Claire, please let me explain." Leonard opened the folder and took out some documents. "What we discovered, it changes everything." He held out a paper to her, and Claire took it with trembling hands. It was a birth certificate, hers. But there was something strange in the father field. Instead of unknown, as she had always known it to be, there was a name. Edward Wolfman. The world stopped. Claire read the document 3 times before she could process what she was seeing. Edward Wolfman, the founder of Wolfman Corp., Leonard's father. "This isn't possible," she whispered. "It is possible, and it's true." Leonard approached slowly, as if she were a wounded animal that might bolt. "Your father is my father. You're my half-sister, Claire." The folder fell from her hands, the papers scattering on the floor. Claire felt her legs give way and leaned against the wall to keep from falling. "No, no, this can't be happening." "Apparently my father had a relationship with your mother in the 90s. She was a housekeeper at the family home, and when she found out she was pregnant, she was fired and forced to leave the city. She never told him about you." "Stop." Claire held up a hand, trying to stop the flow of information that was shattering her reality. "Stop talking." please. But Leonard continued, relentless. There are documents, photos, evidence that the relationship existed. And legally, Claire, you are entitled to a significant portion of the family inheritance. I don't want the inheritance, she screamed, the tears finally falling. I don't want any of it. I just wanted, what? What did you want? To be loved for who I am, not for who my father was, not for how much money I might inherit, not because of security protocol or corporate policy. She was sobbing now, the full weight of the revelation crashing down on her. I wanted you to choose me because I'm me, just me. Leonard tried to approach, but she moved away. You knew, she said suddenly, her eyes narrowing. This whole time, you knew who I was. I found out 2 weeks ago. I was trying to find the best way to tell you. Liar. Her voice was ice cold now. You knew from the beginning. That's why you chose me. That's why you brought me here. It wasn't because you saw me, it was because you saw an opportunity. That's not true, isn't it? Then explain this. What happens now? Do I get promoted to the family's bastard daughter? Do I get an office on a lower floor and a monthly allowance to keep quiet? The cruelty of her own words surprised Claire, but the pain was so great she wanted to hurt him as she was being hurt. Leonard looked at her as if she had slapped him. Do you really think I would do that? I don't know what you're capable of anymore. I don't know if I ever did. They looked at each other for a long moment, two strangers separated by a chasm that seemed insurmountable. All the intimacy they had built, all the nights of conversation and affection, it all seemed to have been built on a lie. Claire, please, let me explain. But she was already walking toward the elevator. No, I don't need any more explanations. I need to think. When you come back, if I come back. She turned to look at him one last time, the man who had dominated her. Dreams for months now seemed like a stranger. Leonard, answer me one thing. If you didn't know who my father was, if I were just the cleaner you met on the 33rd floor, would you still be interested in me now? The silence that followed was deafening. Claire nodded as if she had received the confirmation she feared. That's what I thought. The elevator arrived and she stepped in without looking back. As it descended, Claire leaned her head against the cold wall and finally allowed the tears to fall freely. 26 years of life and she had finally discovered who her father was. Discovered that she was entitled to a fortune, a social position, everything she had ever dreamed of having. And she had also discovered that the man she had fallen in love with had perhaps never truly seen her at all. Perhaps he had only seen an opportunity, a complication to be managed, a piece on the chessboard of family politics. When she reached the ground floor, Claire looked up at the lights of the upper floors of Wolfman Corp. Up there, on the 34th floor that didn't exist, Leonard was probably still standing where she had left him, trying to process the conversation that had exploded between them. She wondered if he would follow her, if he would try to explain, apologize, fight for her. But when she left the building and looked back, all the lights on the 34th floor were off, and Claire knew that this might be the last time she set foot in Wolfman Corp as an employee. From now on, if she returned, it would be as an heiress. The question was, did she want to come back? Claire didn't go back the next night, or the one after. For a whole week, she stayed locked in her small apartment in the Bronx, trying to process everything she had discovered. The birth certificate lay on her kitchen table, next to overdue bills and takeout menus she couldn't afford. A document worth millions, lost among the remnants of a simple dead-end life. She had called the company, saying she was sick. It wasn't a lie. She felt physically ill whenever she thought of Leonard, of the revelation, of the possibility that everything between them had been an elaborate sham. But what tormented her most was the doubt. What if he was sincere? What if he really had only recently discovered her parentage? What if his feelings were real, regardless of who she was? At the end of the week, a lack of money forced her back to reality. She couldn't stay home forever, no matter how confused she was. She needed to work, needed the job, at least until she decided what to do with the information she had. When she returned to Wolfman Corp the following Monday, everything seemed normal. The security guards greeted her as always. The elevator took her to the floors she needed to clean. The work continued, as usual. But Claire felt different. She walked the corridors knowing that technically a part of all this was hers. It was a strange and unsettling feeling. Leonard wasn't on the 33rd floor, not on Tuesday, not on Wednesday. On Thursday, she found out through comments among other employees that he had traveled to Chicago for a series of meetings with investors. Claire wondered if he had run away because of her. It was on Friday that she realized she was being watched. There was a man in a suit in the lobby talking on the phone, but his eyes followed her as she passed. The next day it was someone else, an elegant woman with a laptop sitting in the ground floor cafe. Always someone different, always in her line of sight. At first Claire thought she was being paranoid, but the following week the feeling intensified. There were people taking pictures of her with their phones when she left work, unfamiliar cars parked on her street, calls that disconnected when she answered. Then the bomb dropped. The headline appeared on a Thursday on the website of the most popular gossip magazine in New York. Wolfman Corp are having affair with cleaning lady. The photo accompanying the story had been taken in the company elevator. It showed Leonard and Claire together in a moment she didn't even remember, but which looked too intimate to be a simple coincidence of timing. The text was cruel and detailed. It described Claire as a young opportunist who seduced the billionaire CEO, spoke of secret meetings on the upper floors of the company, and insinuated that she was only interested in the family fortune. It even included information about where she lived, her mother, her past. Claire's cell phone began to ring incessantly. Unknown. Numbers, journalists wanting comments, curious neighbors. She turned it off, but that didn't stop them from showing up at her apartment building. The first morning after the story was published, there were at least 10 people waiting on the sidewalk. Photographers, reporters, onlookers. Claire had to leave through the back door to get to work. Wolfman Corp was in an uproar. Employees whispered in the hallways, their gazes following her wherever she went. Some showed curiosity, others contempt, others a strange mixture of envy and pity. Claire's supervisor, Mr. Jenkins, a good-natured man who had always been kind to her, called her into his office on Monday. "Claire, you know I like you, kid," he said, avoiding direct eye contact, "but the situation has become complicated. They're pressuring me to make a decision about your employment." "Who's pressuring you?" Mr. Jenkins sighed. "People above my pay grade. People who think your presence here is causing an unnecessary distraction." Claire felt the floor open up beneath her. "Are you firing me?" "I'm offering you paid leave. Until things calm down, it's the most I can do." Paid leave. It was a disguised dismissal, and they both knew it. Claire nodded, trying to maintain her dignity. "I understand." "Claire." Mr. Jenkins hesitated. "I don't know if what they're saying is true, and frankly, it's none of my business. But if you really do have some claim to this company, as some people are whispering, maybe it's time you got a lawyer." She left his office in a daze. Outside, she could see some employees pretending to work while they watched her. The gossip had spread like wildfire. Everyone knew. Everyone had an opinion. When she got to her apartment, even more journalists were waiting. Claire entered through the back door again, ran up the stairs and locked herself inside. That's when the phone rang. Not her cell, which was still off, but the landline she almost never used. "Claire Santos." The voice on the other end was female, elegant, with a slight accent that wasn't native to New York. "Who's speaking?" "Helena Wolfman, I think we need to talk." Claire's blood ran cold. The family matriarch. The woman who had called their relationship a fleeting infatuation, who had described Claire as unsuitable. "We have nothing to talk about," Claire replied, trying to sound braver than she felt. "Oh, but we do. Especially now that your true identity has become public knowledge." Claire sat down heavily in her kitchen chair. "What do you mean? Did you think you could blackmail my family forever, that no one would find out about your origins?" Helena's voice was cold, calculating. "I know exactly who you are, dear. And I know exactly what you want. I don't want anything from your family." Helena laughed, a humorless sound. "Of course you do. You all do. Your mother did too when she decided to get involved with my husband. The difference is, she had the good sense to disappear when she was paid to. The words hit Claire like punches. My mother never told me. Your mother never told you a lot of things, I imagine, like the fact that she received a considerable sum to leave the city and never come back, like the fact that she signed a document agreeing to never reveal the child's paternity, like the fact that she violated that agreement by putting my husband's name on the birth certificate. Claire was shaking now. That's not true. I have the documents to prove it. I can send copies if you like. Your mother was no innocent victim, dear. She was an opportunist who got what she wanted and then broke the deal when she had the chance. Stop talking about my mother. I'll stop when you stop threatening my family. Helena's voice became even harsher. Did you think you could seduce my son, use your origins to blackmail him, and that I would just stand by and watch? You have no idea who you're dealing with. I'm not blackmailing anyone. I didn't even know who my father was until Leonard told me. How convenient. And I suppose it was also a coincidence that you got a job at our company. A coincidence that you got close to my son specifically? Claire had no answer. When put that way, it did seem very convenient. I'm going to make you a one-time offer, Helena continued. $5 million. In return, you sign a new non-disclosure agreement, renounce any claim to the family inheritance, and disappear from my son's life permanently. It's more than your mother received, and far more generous than you deserve. I don't. Think carefully before you answer. The alternative is that I destroy your life publicly, and believe me, I have the resources to do that very creatively. The line was silent for a moment, then Helena continued, You have 24 hours to decide. I'll have my lawyer contact you tomorrow. And she hung up. Claire stared at the phone, completely stunned. $5 million. It was more money than she could ever imagine having. It was freedom, security, the chance to start over anywhere in the world. But it was also the price of never seeing Leonard again. It was admitting that everything between them had been a mistake, a misunderstanding, a manipulation. Her cell phone started ringing again, even though it was off. She quickly turned it on and saw a series of messages from unknown numbers. Some were from journalists, others from curious people, but one caught her eye. It was a link to a video that had been posted on social media. The title read, Gold Digger Cleaner Tries to Scam Billionaire. With trembling hands, Claire clicked the link. The 3-minute video showed photos of her leaving the company building, interspersed with images of the Wolfman mansion, luxury cars, and numbers representing the family's fortune. A male voice narrated about opportunistic women who take advantage of rich men, about relationship scams, about how society needs to protect itself from this kind of predatory behavior. In the comments, hundreds of people called her a gold digger, a scammer, a homewrecker. There were insults she didn't even know existed, veiled threats, photos of her that someone had found on social media and was sharing with cruel comments about her appearance, her origins, her family. Claire closed the video, but it was too late. Her life had become public entertainment. She was the talk of the town, the villain of the moment, the perfect example of everything wrong with the world. And, worst of all, Leonard hadn't said a peep publicly. Not a statement, not a press release, not even a private message. It was as if she didn't exist. The next morning, the situation worsened. Someone had found her mother's address on the Jersey shore and was harassing the poor woman, who at 60 had no idea what was happening. Claire had to take a bus to the coast, wearing sunglasses and a hat, to try to protect her mother from the circus her life had become. She found her mother, Mary, crying in the kitchen of the small house where she lived, surrounded by curious neighbors and journalists, shouting questions through the window. "Mom, I'm so sorry," Claire said, hugging the frail woman who had raised her alone with so much sacrifice. "What did you do, honey? What did you do?" Claire didn't know how to answer. What had she done? She had fallen in love. She had believed she could be seen, be loved, be chosen for who she was. She had dreamed too big. They spent the afternoon talking, and for the first time in her life, Mary told her the truth about Claire's father, about the brief but intense relationship with Edward Wolfman, about discovering the pregnancy, about Helena's offer for her to disappear, about the money she had received and used to give her daughter a better life. "I didn't want you to know," Mary cried. "I didn't want you to grow up feeling rejected, abandoned. I thought it would be better to let you think he simply didn't exist." "Then why did you put his name on the certificate?" "Because he had a right to know. And you had a right to know your origins if you ever wanted to. I didn't know Helena had changed the official records to hide it." Another piece of the puzzle fell into place. Helena had not only bought her mother's silence, she had manipulated official documents to hide Claire's existence, until Leonard had it investigated and discovered the truth. When Claire returned to New York that night, her decision was made. She would not accept Helena's money, but she also wouldn't stay in New York to be publicly humiliated every day. She was going to leave. She spent the night packing, closing her bank account, organizing the few documents she owned. In the morning she called a lawyer whose name she had found online, specializing in family and inheritance law. "Sir, I would like to formally renounce an inheritance," she said when she finally got through to him. "Ma'am, before you make any rash decisions, I need you to understand exactly what's involved. From what I've read in the papers, we're talking about a very significant sum. I don't care about the money. Perhaps not now, but you might in the future. Why don't you come to my office so we can talk in person? I can explain your options, your right." Claire scheduled the appointment for late afternoon. Before that, she had one last thing to do. She took the subway to Midtown and went up to the 33rd floor of Wolfman Corp for the last time. This time, she didn't go as an employee. She went as an intruder. Leonard's secretary tried to stop her, but Claire walked right past, opened the office door and went in. Leonard was on the phone, gesturing as he spoke in English to someone. When he saw her, he cut the conversation short. "Can I call you back?" he said into the phone and hung up. They looked at each other in silence for a long moment. Leonard looked tired, thinner, with dark circles under his eyes she didn't remember seeing before, but there was something different in his gaze, something she couldn't decipher. "You disappeared," he said finally. "So did you. You flew to Chicago right when the scandal broke. How convenient." Leonard stood up, walking toward her. "Claire, I can explain." "You don't need to explain anything. I came here to tell you I'm leaving." "Where are you going?" "I don't know. Far away. To a place where no one knows who I am, or who my father was." Leonard stopped in front of her. "And the inheritance? Your legal rights?" Claire smiled bitterly. "I'm giving it all up. Your mother will be happy to know her problem is solving itself." "My mother?" Leonard hesitated. "Claire, there are things you don't know about this whole situation. I know she offered me $5 million to disappear. I know she was responsible for the leak to the press. I know she manipulated documents to hide my existence." Claire crossed her arms. "What else do I need to know?" "That I didn't know about any of it. That when I found out what she'd done, I had the biggest fight of my life with her. That she's been temporarily removed from any decision-making at the company." That was new. Claire watched him, trying to detect any sign of a lie. "So what? What does that change?" "It changes that I fought for you, that I'm fighting for you." "Where was your fighting when I was being publicly humiliated? Where was it when journalists were harassing my mother? Where was it when I needed you?" Leonard looked down. "I was trying to find a way to protect you without making things worse. My lawyers said any public statement could be used against us in court." "In court?" "I'm suing every media outlet that published false information about you. I'm tracing the source of the leaks. I'm trying to clear your name." Claire shook her head. "It's too late for that." "It's not. It's never too late." Leonard reached out to touch her, but she pulled away. "Claire, I love you." The words hung in the air between them, the first words of love he had ever spoken. But instead of relief or joy, Claire felt only a profound sadness. "You have a strange way of showing love," she said softly. "I know, I screwed up. I screwed up when I hesitated to go public with our relationship. I screwed up when I let my mother know too much about my personal life. I screwed up when I didn't come after you the moment you found out about your father." His eyes were moist now. "But don't make the mistake of giving up on us. Don't make the mistake of throwing away what we have." "What do we have, Leonard?" Claire faced him directly. "Secret meetings based on a lie about my identity. A relationship your family will always try to destroy. A love you could only declare when I was walking out the door." Leonard didn't answer. "That's what I thought," Claire said, echoing her own words from weeks ago. "Goodbye, Leonard. I hope you find someone suitable to share your life with." She turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. "If you leave now, I will come after you. I will search until I find you. I will spend the rest of my life trying to prove you were wrong about me." Claire turned slowly. "Why?" "Because you're the only person who makes me want to be better than I am. Because without you, I go back to being the empty man I was before. Because I love you in a way I didn't know it was possible to love someone." For a moment, Claire hesitated. There was sincerity in his voice, vulnerability in his eyes, an openness she had never seen before. But then she remembered the headlines, the insults, the public humiliation. She remembered Helena's offer, the discovery about her mother, all the lies and half-truths that surrounded this love he claimed. "Then you'll just have to look for me," she said simply. And she walked out, leaving Leonard alone in his empire of glass and concrete, surrounded by everything he had ever had, except the one thing he had finally discovered he wanted. Outside the building, Claire looked up one last time. She could see his silhouette in the 33rd floor window, motionless, watching her leave. She walked away without looking back, toward the lawyer's office, toward renouncing the inheritance, toward a new life, somewhere she could go back to being invisible. But this time choosing to be invisible. Not because no one saw her, but because she had finally learned that being seen for the wrong reason was worse than not being seen at all. Claire chose Charleston almost by chance. She saw a job ad for a small construction company specializing in affordable housing projects and thought it would be ironically fitting to work building homes for people who, like her, dreamed of something better. She rented a small apartment on Folly Beach and got the job as an administrative assistant at the construction company. It wasn't architecture, but it was close enough that she could observe the projects, ask discreet questions, and learn. Say by osmosis. For the first few months, Claire kept herself completely isolated. She worked, went home, read used architecture books, and spent her afternoons walking along the beach. She had cut her hair very short, changed her style of dress, and created a new identity. For all intents and purposes, Claire Santos from New York was dead. Now she was just Clara, a quiet woman who had moved from up north to start over. It took 3 months to sleep through the night without dreaming of Leonard. It took 6 to get through a day without wondering what he was doing. It took almost a year to stop compulsively checking the news about Wolfman Corp online, and it was through those checks that she found out what was happening in New York. The company was in a freefall. The stock had plummeted after the scandal, several major investors had withdrawn their support, and a series of projects had been cancelled. But what caught Claire's attention most was the change in Leonard's behavior. The business journals described a man who had become erratic, impulsive, making questionable decisions that left the board of directors worried. He had personally cancelled 3 major contracts, dismissed trusted executives without proper explanation, and been absent from crucial meetings. One business magazine speculated that Leonard Wolfman was having a nervous breakdown. Another piece of news that intrigued Claire was about Helena Wolfman. The family matriarch had been temporarily removed from any executive role in the company after an internal investigation revealed irregularities in human resources procedures. The article was vague, but Claire suspected Leonard had discovered more about his mother's manipulations. 3 months later, a new bombshell hit the media. Helena was being investigated by the district attorney's office for document forgery and corruption. Apparently, the investigation into Claire's case had revealed a series of other irregularities, including undeclared payments to fired employees and fraudulent alterations to official records. Claire read the news with a bitter satisfaction. Helena had tried to destroy her, but had ended up destroying herself with her own weapons. It was around this time that she began to allow herself to dream again. Not dreams about Leonard, but dreams about her future. She had saved enough money to enroll in a technical course in building construction. It wasn't architecture, but it was a start. And for the first time since arriving in Charleston, Claire began to make friends. She met Marina, a co-worker who invited her to lunch. She met Robert, the instructor of her technical course, who noticed her natural talent for reading blueprints and encouraged her to consider college. She met Mrs. Irene, the elderly neighbor who adopted her as a surrogate granddaughter, and insisted on making her lunch every Sunday. Slowly, Claire rebuilt a life. Not the life she had dreamed of, not the life she could have had with the Wolfman inheritance, but a life of her own, built with her own choices and efforts. It was on a Tuesday in March, almost 2 years after she had left New York, that her old life found her. Claire was leaving work when she saw a black car parked in front of the construction company's building. It wasn't a common car for that area, and there was something familiar about the silhouette of the driver that made her stop. Leonard was leaning against the side of the car, hands in his pockets, his gaze fixed on the building's entrance. When he saw her, he straightened up but didn't move. For a moment, Claire considered turning around and going back inside, pretending she hadn't seen him, waiting for him to leave. But there was something different about him. He was thinner, his hair slightly longer, and he was wearing jeans and a simple t-shirt instead of his usual impeccable suit. He looked more human. She approached slowly, her heart pounding like a drum in her chest. "How did you find me?" "It wasn't difficult. You renounced the inheritance through a New York lawyer, and he had to send the documents to a notary's office here in Charleston. From there it was a matter of patience and a few private investigators." Leonard watched her closely. "You've changed." "We all change." Claire crossed her arms, trying to appear more confident than she felt. "What do you want?" "To talk. Just talk." "About what?" "About how you let your family destroy me. About how it took you almost 2 years to come after me." Leonard looked down. "About how I screwed everything up. About how I've spent the last 2 years trying to fix the mistakes I made. About how you were right about practically everything you said to me that day." She wasn't expecting that. "Leonard, do you have a few minutes? There's something I need to show you." Against her better judgment, Claire nodded. She got into his car, noticing it smelled different. Less expensive cologne, more human. They drove in silence until they reached a small cafe on the beach, very different from the sophisticated restaurants Leonard used to frequent. They sat at a plastic table overlooking the ocean, and for a moment neither of them knew what to say. "How are you?" Leonard finally asked. "Good, really good." It was true, and that surprised her. "I work at a construction company. I'm taking a technical course. I have friends. It's a simple life, but it's mine." Leonard nodded as if expecting that answer. "I'm happy for you. And you? How's the company?" "Almost bankrupt." Leonard gave a humorless laugh. "It turned out my mother had been involved in various illegal activities over the years. Document forgery, bribery, blackmail. When it all came to light, we lost most of our contracts and investors." Claire watched him, looking for signs that he blamed her for it. But she found nothing but resigned acceptance. "Are you blaming me?" "On the contrary, I'm thanking you." Leonard took an envelope from his pocket. "This is a letter I wrote to you 6 months ago. I never sent it because I didn't know if I had the right to contact you after everything that happened." Claire took the envelope but didn't open it. "What does it say?" "That you were right. That I was a coward who let fear of public opinion and family pressure speak louder than my feelings. That I deserved to lose you." Leonard looked out at the sea. "That if I could go back in time, I would have owned our relationship from day one. I would have stood up to my mother, the press, anyone who tried to keep us apart. But you can't go back in time." "No, but I can try to be the man you deserved me to be from the start." Claire opened the letter. It was pages and pages in Leonard's neat handwriting, detailing not just an apology, but a deep analysis of all the mistakes he had made. He wrote about confronting his mother, about the decisions he made to cleanse the company of her toxic influence, about the lawsuits he filed against the media outlets that had defamed Claire. But the part that moved her most was the end. "I'm not asking for a second chance because I think I deserve one. I'm asking because I finally understand that loving someone means fighting for them, even when, especially when, everyone is against you. I've learned that love is choosing that person every day, publicly, proudly, regardless of the consequences. Claire folded the letter carefully. Leonard, why did you come here? Because I still love you. Because 2 years away from you made me realize that everything else, the company, the money, the social status, means nothing without the right person to share it with. Because I want to ask you not to go back to the life we had, but to build a new life together. What kind of new life? Leonard hesitated, as if about to take a leap in the dark. I sold my share of Wolfman Corp, or what was left of it. I used part of the money to pay reparations to all the people my mother harmed over the years, including your mother. I used another part to create a foundation that offers scholarships to low-income youth interested in architecture and engineering. Claire looked at him in surprise. You did what? I left the company. I broke with everything that represented the life I had before. Leonard leaned forward, his eyes fixed on hers. Claire, I want to start from scratch. I want to learn to be just Leonard, not the Wolfman heir. I want to build something new, something that has meaning beyond profit. And what does that have to do with me? Everything, because I want to build it with you. Not because you're my father's daughter, not because you're entitled to an inheritance, not for political convenience or family pressure. Because you are the woman I fell in love with, and because together we can create something beautiful. Claire was silent for a long moment, watching the man before her. This Leonard was different from any version of him she had known. There was a humility there, a vulnerability, an honesty that was absent before. What exactly are you proposing? That you give me a chance to prove I've changed. Not a chance to go back to what we were, but to discover what we can be now. Leonard reached his hand across the table, stopping a few inches from hers. I'm not asking for an answer today, I'm asking for permission to try. Claire looked at his hand, at the man who had dominated her thoughts for so long, at the opportunity being offered. Leonard, you don't understand. I've built a life here. I have responsibilities, commitments, people who depend on me. I can't just drop everything, and I'm not asking you to drop anything. I'm asking you to let me be a part of this life you've built. What do you mean? Leonard smiled for the first time since he'd arrived. I bought a piece of land nearby. I'm hiring local architects to design a community center that will offer free vocational courses. I need someone to manage the project, someone who understands both construction and people who need opportunities. Claire felt her jaw drop. Are you offering me a job? I'm offering you a partnership. I'm offering you the chance to use the knowledge you've acquired to make a difference in the lives of people like we were. I'm offering you the opportunity to be the architect you always dreamed of being. Claire's heart raced. It was everything she had ever wanted, but coming from the man who had nearly destroyed her, it seemed too good to be true. What if it doesn't work out? What if we fight if we can't work together? Then at least we will have tried, and you'll have an incredible project on your resume. Leonard finally touched her hand lightly. Claire, I'm not trying to buy your forgiveness with a job offer. I'm trying to show you that I've learned from my mistakes, that I now understand that true love isn't about possessing someone. It's about supporting that person's dreams. Claire looked at their intertwined hands, feeling the familiarity of his touch, but also something new, respect, equality. I need time to think. Of course, I'll be in town for a few weeks, organizing the project details. You can give me an answer when you feel ready. Leonard released her hand and stood up, pulling a wallet from his pants. But Claire stopped him. I'll pay for my own coffee, she said firmly. He paused, looked at her for a moment, and then smiled. A genuine smile, without the layers of control and calculation she remembered. Of course. My apologies. They said goodbye in front of the cafe, without hugs, without kisses, without promises. Just two adults who had hurt each other and were now trying to figure out if it was possible to fix what had been broken. That night, Claire stayed up late, rereading Leonard's letter, thinking about the proposal, trying to separate her feelings about the man from her feelings about the professional opportunity. The truth was, she still loved him. 2 years of distance hadn't changed that. But it was also true that she didn't completely trust him. Not yet. Too much had happened. Too many wounds were still open. But maybe, just maybe, people could really change. Maybe Leonard had learned the lessons he needed to learn. Maybe it was possible to build something new on the ruins of what had been destroyed. The next morning, Claire woke up with a certainty that surprised her. She was going to give him a chance. Not because she believed in happy endings, or because she still dreamed of Prince Charming, but because it was a chance to realize her professional dreams by working with someone who, despite all his mistakes, knew her better than anyone else. And if, in the process, they discovered there was still something to be saved between them, good. If not, at least, she would have a career in architecture. It was a risky bet, but Claire had learned that the best things in life usually were. Claire decided to accept the proposal on a rainy Thursday, 6 days after their conversation at the cafe. She had spent the entire week weighing the pros and cons, talking to Marina about the situation, losing sleep over the possibilities that lay before her. What convinced her wasn't the prospect of being near Leonard again, but the detailed description of the project he had left with her. The community centre would be built in an underserved area of Charleston, offering free courses in construction, electrical work, plumbing, and even basic architecture for low-income youth. It was exactly the kind of project she would have dreamed of creating if she had the resources. She found Leonard in the small office he had rented downtown. It was a simple space without the ostentation she remembered from Wolfman Corp, but it was functional and welcoming. Project blueprints were spread across the tables, samples of building materials were laid out, and Leonard was hunched over a computer, focused. "I accept," she said, without preamble when he looked up. Leonard looked at her for a moment, as if unsure he had heard correctly. Accept what exactly? The partnership, the project, the chance to work together. Claire walked in and closed the door behind her. But with conditions. I'm listening. First, this is strictly professional at the beginning. I don't want to mix our personal history with work. If anything is going to happen between us again, it will be slow, with total honesty, and no pressure. Leonard nodded. I completely agree. Second, I want a real stake in the project, not just to be your assistant. I want to be heard, respected, and have the autonomy to make decisions. You'll be my partner, not my employee. Third, if this doesn't work out, for any reason, you guarantee that I can finish my technical course and you'll help me find another job. I don't want my professional future to depend on the success or failure of our personal relationship. Leonard stood up and extended his hand to her. I accept all conditions. Do you want to formalize this in writing? Claire shook his hand, feeling the firm grip, the sincerity in his eyes. For now, your word is enough. In the months that followed, they worked together with a dynamic that surprised them both. Leonard really had changed. He was more patient, more collaborative, more willing to listen to opinions different from his own. And Claire discovered she had a natural talent for managing projects, coordinating teams, and turning ideas into reality. The community center began to take shape. They hired local labor, using small business owners who needed the opportunity. Claire insisted on including women in the construction crew, something unusual for the region, but which proved to be extremely effective. During this period, Leonard and Claire rebuilt their friendship before attempting to rebuild anything else. They had lunch together every day, discussing aspects of the project, but gradually the conversations expanded to other topics. He told her about the painful process of separating from his family and the company, about the therapy he had started, about how he was learning to be just Leonard, not the heir to an empire. She talked about her 2 years in Charleston, about the people she had met, about how she had discovered her own strength away from the shadow of the Wolfman family. She spoke of her plans for the future, of her dream of one day having her own architectural firm, of the satisfaction of helping people build their homes. 3 months after the project began, they had their first kiss in 2 years. It was on a Saturday afternoon when they were working alone in the office, reviewing blueprints. Leonard had made a joke, Claire laughed in that spontaneous way he had forgotten how much he missed, and when their eyes met, the attraction that had always existed between them resurfaced. But this time, it was different. There was no desperate urgency, no sense of something forbidden. It was natural, right? Like two people who knew each other deeply and were choosing to be together. "I still feel the same way about you," Leonard whispered afterward, his forehead resting against hers. "Me too," Claire replied. "But this time, let's take it slow. Let's do it right." And they did it right. Public dinners, walks on the beach, introducing Leonard to the friends Claire had made in Charleston. He met Marina, Robert, Mrs. Irene, and was accepted not as the ex-billionaire, but as the man who clearly made Claire happy. 6 months later, when the community center was nearly finished, Leonard made a decision that surprised even Claire. "I want to make a public statement," he said one Monday morning. "What kind of statement?" "About us, about what happened in New York, about the mistakes I made, about who you really are." Leonard looked at her seriously. "I want to clear your name once and for all." Claire hesitated. "Leonard, that could reignite the whole scandal." "I don't care. In fact, that's exactly why I need to do it. Because 2 years ago, when you needed me to defend you most, I didn't. Now I want to." The interview was given to a national television program on a respected network. Leonard not only publicly admitted his mistakes, but explained the entire situation. Helena's manipulation, the forged documents, the blackmail, the orchestrated campaign to destroy Claire's reputation. "Claire Santos is a woman of integrity, a hard worker who fell in love with the wrong person at the wrong time," he said, looking directly at the camera. "She was the victim of a system that punishes women for daring to dream above the social station they were born into. And I was a coward for not protecting her when she needed it most." The reaction was immediate, and to their surprise, overwhelmingly positive. The media, which had crucified Claire 2 years earlier, now portrayed her as a heroine who had survived a family conspiracy. Several other women came forward with similar stories of being persecuted for relationships with men from different social classes. Claire watched the interview from the apartment she now shared with Leonard in Charleston, holding his hand as she saw her reputation finally restored. "Thank you," she said when the program ended. "For what?" "For finally defending me. For finally fighting for us." Leonard kissed her softly. "I should have done it from the beginning, but at least now everyone knows the truth." A year later, the community center was inaugurated with a party that brought the whole community together. Claire cut the ribbon alongside Leonard, proud of what they had built together, not just the building, but the new life they had created. In its first year of operation, the center trained 300 young people in various technical fields. 80% of them found jobs or started their own businesses. Claire was recognized by the city as one of the social entrepreneurs of the year. It was at the center's first anniversary party that Leonard proposed. It was nothing extravagant or public. It was at the end of the night, when they were alone in the space they had created together, looking at the photos of the graduates on the walls. "Claire," he said, getting down on one knee in the middle of the main classroom. "2 years ago I lost you because I didn't know how to fight for you. Today, I know exactly what I'm fighting for. Will you marry me?" The ring was simple, elegant, nothing like the ostentatious jewelry she might have expected from the old Leonard. It was perfect. "Yes," she answered without hesitation, "but only if you promise we'll keep working together, that we'll create more projects like this, that will make a difference in people's lives." "I promise," Leonard said, sliding the ring onto her finger. "And I also promise that I'll spend the rest of my life proving I deserve you." The wedding was small, intimate, in a seaside chapel in Charleston. Mary came from the Jersey Shore for the ceremony, finally meeting the son-in-law who had caused so much turmoil in her daughter's life. Marina was the maid of honor, Robert was the best man, and Mrs. Irene cried more than the mother of the bride. Helena Wolfman was not invited. She was, in any case, serving a sentence under house arrest for document forgery and corruption. On their honeymoon, they traveled to rural Appalachia, visiting communities and taking notes for future projects for the institute they had founded, because that's what they had become, partners in life and work, united by love and a common purpose to use their resources and talents to help others. 3 years after the wedding, Claire graduated from a state university with a degree in architecture on a scholarship from the program she herself had helped create. Leonard was in the front row at the graduation, applauding as if she had won the Nobel Prize. She was 5 months pregnant at the time, expecting a girl they decided to name Hope. A name perhaps too on the nose, but one that represented exactly what they had built together. The hope that it was possible to start over, that people could change, that true love was the kind that survives the storms and emerges stronger on the other side. On the night of her graduation, they were sitting on the porch of their apartment, looking out at the ocean, Claire caressing her belly while Leonard read proposals for a new community center they wanted to build in the Mississippi Delta. "Do you regret anything?" she asked suddenly. Leonard looked up from the papers. "About what?" "Giving up the company, the fortune, the life you had before." He smiled, that smile she had learned to love more than any jewel or expensive gift. "Claire, I traded an empty life for one full of meaning. I traded a fortune I didn't build for work that makes me proud. I traded a name that weighed on my shoulders for an identity I chose." He took her hand, and most importantly, "I traded a version of myself that even I couldn't love for a man you want to share your life with. How could I ever regret that?" Claire intertwined her fingers with his, feeling the weight of the wedding ring, a symbol of conscious choices and hard-won love. "You know what's funny?" "What?" "When we met, I dreamed of being seen, of being important to someone. I thought that meant being chosen by a powerful rich man who could give me everything I didn't have. And now? Now I know that being important to someone means finding a person who chooses you every day, not because you need them, but because you complete each other. It means building something together that's bigger than either of you alone." Leonard kissed her hand. "And we've built that, haven't we?" Claire looked around. The simple but cozy apartment, the projects spread across the table, the growing belly with the life they had created, the sense of peace that came from knowing exactly who she was and what she wanted from life. "We have," she replied. "We've built a love that's worth it." And there, on the porch overlooking the sea, with hope stirring in her belly and Leonard planning ways to change the world one project at a time, Claire finally understood what it meant to be truly seen, truly loved, truly chosen, not for who her father was, not for how much money she could inherit, not for convenience or family politics, but for who she chose to become, for what she chose to build, for the love she chose to fight to keep. And she discovered that this kind of love, earned with hard work and brutal honesty, was far more valuable than any inheritance she could have ever claimed. 10 years later, when the institute they founded had built community centers in 12 states, when Hope was learning to draw her first architectural plans, when Leonard was being nationally recognized as one of the country's leading social entrepreneurs, they still looked into each other's eyes every morning and chose each other again. Because true love isn't about finding the right person on the first try. It's about two imperfect people who choose to work together to become the right version for each other. And Claire and Leonard had learned that some of the best constructions in life are those built on the ruins of what came before, with stronger materials, firmer foundations, and the wisdom that only comes to those who have seen it all fall apart and still chose to rebuild together.